Last time out, the Weekend Warriors put on a show in Canada. The race featured 12 lead changes, but it was Simon Meyer who was able to get out of the pits quick enough to break the draft of the rest of the field to score his first overall victory. It was also a race which featured the first overall podium, filled with drivers from the AM and S2 classes. Now, the field will be put through some major tests to see if they can come away with a strong finish here on GSRC. Hello everyone and welcome to the 8th round of the Formula V Weekend Warriors from iRacing's virtual Summit Point Motorsports Park. I'm Justin Prince. Alongside the booth today is Robert O'Brien. Behind the scenes is our director Sean Ambrose, and he's using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. Today takes us to a long-time track on the iRacing service. This classic club-type course has a strong mix of technical corners and long straights. Let's learn more about it with our GSRC track guide.
Welcome to Summit Point Raceway. Once the stomping grounds of IMSA and Trans Am vehicles thundering through the West Virginia mountains, this circuit is now mainly used for club racing and performance driver training. Situationed a couple hours west of Washington, D.C., there are actually two entirely separate circuits that can be tackled here on the iRacing service. The main circuit is just shy of 2 miles in length, including 10 turns, and can be chopped off into the short version, which has 9 turns and only 1.5 miles for a lap. The Jefferson circuit is its own 1.1 mile piece of pavement with a mere 7 turns and uniquely can be run in reverse. Both tracks are astonishingly narrow and provide quite a technical challenge. On the main course, the most popular place to pass is down into the first corner hairpin. While some drivers may try a brave dive into turn 5, the frighteningly fast kinked entry makes it prone to things going wrong quickly. Between there and turn 9, it's essentially a single file affair with nothing but tight and twisty bends snaking their way around. The Jefferson circuit isn't used as often, and because there are a few straights long enough to get a run on someone, most drivers are forced to wait for a mistake to pounce on. Otherwise, qualifying will be key. Believe it or not, IMSA's GT class raced here in the late 80s, and even Can-Am stopped in back in 86. While it probably sees much more competition here in the virtual world, it's easy to see why plenty of real drivers love to take their vehicles out to try and tackle this historic Appalachian venue.
That was a look at your GSRC track guide for Summit Point. Now, Robert, this is a track that's been on the service for a very long time, so many of these competitors have experience with it. Many of them have the opportunity to race with this car in the rookie class, in fact, but today could bring some challenges for our competitors.
You're absolutely right, Justin. It's going to be a difficult one for these guys. It's new car, old track, so they can't use any of the information they've got from the MX-5s. 10 turns, 2 miles or just over 3 kilometers long, and with a very, very difficult section near Carousel. I'm pretty sure they're going to have to be very mindful of each other, especially when they're coming into these tight corners. That long straight, as we've seen before so many times throughout the Formula V Weekend Warriors, there's going to be a lot of slipstream battles going into a sharp right-hander or left-hander corner. So they're going to be very, very stressed when it comes to trying to keep the guys behind them coming down that long straight. And then as we come up through Carousel and into that tricky section just past the chute, it's going to be very technical and a lot of side-by-side action I envisage coming around the chute. And then when they get back onto that long straight and then for the right on Paddock Bend, it is going to be very, very scary for these guys. But let's see how they do.
It's going to be interesting indeed, to say the very least, how these drivers will fare around this long-time iRacing circuit. But before we look towards your championship standings, let's remind you of the title sponsor for this series, Ring Free, a unified VoIP for your essential business. Find out more at ringfree.com. Choose connection. These drivers have been preparing for tonight's race in what's expected to be a big one as we are in the closing stages of the season. Let's take a chance to look towards your standings. First with the S1 standings, where Arabian has been dominant. He's been starting a majority of these races, but you have to factor in the potential of drops, especially with some of the drivers taking those opportunities the past couple weeks. David Gasper is one of those competitors, for example, who has done so, where he's dropped to 142 points back. Then Kraski is 121 points back in that second position. Greg Stefani and Matt Orr currently round out your top 5 in the S1 standings. Now, when it comes to our S2 standings as well, things are intriguing with some of those competitors, especially with some of the performances, with Thomas Renders on the top of those standings, Johan Butenga to 101 points back, rather, in second. keep an eye on the driver third in the standings. That is Flavio and Danlo, I should say, who is 136 points behind, with Simon Meyer in 4th position. Ian Gibson rounds out the top 5, the S2 standings. And when it comes to our third category of standings, that's the Master standings, with Thomas Gradwell, Kenneth Batley, Rob Hopp, Tonya Rees, and a tie for 5th between Mike Taylor and Leroy Coppage. Those drivers separated by 168 points. So things look fairly tight in the standings. Keep in mind drops will be a factor in the next few weeks or so. But let's take a look at our race details, Robert.
So it is going to be a 40-minute race with one stop of shared setups going around the summit point today. It is going to be very, very difficult out there, though. I've just had a look at the track temperature. It is going to be 46 degrees Celsius, which is in and around 103, 104 Fahrenheit. So it is a very hot track with tires that don't have a lot of grip and with cars that don't have a lot of drag grip due to aerodynamics. Oh, 113. I'm off by 10. The relative humidity is going to be low, so that's at least going to give them a little bit of reprieve. But that track temperature with those skinny tires, it is going to be very dangerous. They're going to have to give each other a lot of room, especially coming through. This is the chute right here. They're coming through, and just look how close Kenneth Batley is coming onto the outside. If they're going side by side through the chute, it is going to end in tears. So let's hope they give each other enough space today.
Keep in mind, when these drivers were qualifying, some of them in that session had a much earlier start time for the session in terms of in sim at around 8 a.m. So these drivers had a lot more grip during practice and qualifying, with it being as low as 70 degrees Fahrenheit. But now, much more hotter, more towards what the official sessions are, and it's going to be interesting as a result for these temperatures. Keep in mind, for our pro drivers, those are the drivers with numbers 0 through 199. Those are competitors with more than 3,000 I rating. The AM class is anyone with 200 to 899. That's below 3K. And the Masters is the 900 plus. Those are drivers who are 60 plus in age. But to get back towards today's action, it's already just about set to go. The fastest driver in practice, and he was one of the quickest in the earlier sessions as well, Justin Huffman with a 1:27.149. And that means these drivers get the opportunity to be able to roll their way onto the racetrack in just a few moments. It's going to be an interesting race from Summit Point, to say the very least. And these competitors are now all set to line up for your starting grid from West Virginia. The competitors now bring themselves to the starting grid for today's action for a full pace lap, and it's David Gaspers who picked up a double toe during qualifying to secure the pole position. Ian Gibson secured 2nd position, with Andalo in 3rd spot. Justin Huffman, we talked about him a little bit, in 4th position in the 323. Thomas Renders is in 5th. Lawrence Arabian has had a strong season so far. He's in 6th position, with Alexander Risson in 7th. Simon Meyer is in 8th position. Meyer, yes, indeed, in 8th, with Miguel Rusinik in 9th. Kenneth Batley rounds out your top 10.
And then in 11th will be Frederic in the 252 car, Tom Gradwell in 12th, Jim McGill in 13th, Theo and Mike Taylor 14th and 15th, very close to each other indeed. Jim Brewster 16th, Mark Geehan in 17th, Matt Schoblum in 18th, Leroy Coppage in 19th, Edgar Sanicelli in 20th. And rounding off from 21st to 27th, it's going to be David Davidson, Christopher Fasecci, Jared Cowlow, Gary Woblot, Ethan Ginn, Tyler Montgomery, and Alexander Roggenbuck, running out the rest of your field.
So plenty of drivers have made their way to Summit Point for today's action, and we talked a little bit about the racetrack in terms of how you flow through it. Overall, what are your expectations to try and get yourself to the race victory? Because this is a track that has a lot of opportunities to go full throttle, but a lot of opportunities for drivers to try and send into the corner and try and set up the technical sections.
It's going to be a lot of getting into turn one and then holding on for dear life as you get past into turn one, because that is a very long straight, and especially given the fact that to be coming out 150 kilometers an hour, I imagine coming towards Paddock Bend, they're going to try and see if they can keep as much speed as they can coming up to Paddock Bend, carry it through, get the overtake made, and then hopefully the guy behind them doesn't come back at them through Wagon Bend, as if we're going through Chute right now and through Carousel. They'll need to hold on to their position here. Be very careful of these curbs and bumps. It may look flat on camera, but I could definitely tell you they'll upset these kinds of cars.
Definitely going to be an exciting race. Who are you watching out for the most here as these drivers roll their way towards the final sector?
I'm looking at Farns Arabian. He really didn't have a good week last week, and he unfortunately he had an accident that actually took out his car. So he needs, even though he's got a lot of points ahead of him and from second place, he still needs to make good results week in, week out. You can just see him there in the pink car on the right hand side as they come up.
All these competitors are set to go. Round 8 of 2021 Season 1 is all set to go. The green flag waves. David Gasper's on the loud pedal. We're underway from Summit Point. A good launch for Gasper's, heading off towards the loop for the first time as several drivers start to jet out, trying to find their way towards the right side of the racetrack. Others trying to sweep and bobble their way to the draft. They make the way to the corner complex for the first time. Gasper's with a clean launch. Everybody cleanly making their way through the first sector.
Yeah, it's actually very tame right now as they come through. Justin Huffman just tucking in ahead of Ian Gibson, and you can just see Farns Arabian. He's trying to actually make the move through the Wagon Bend. He's very brave doing it this early, but he has made it just about. Yeah, there's not a lot of room though.
You know, you talked about the space here with how close it is, especially that run. F. Gardner turned towards the carousel for the first time. These competitors now go. Already some drivers with apologies over the radio because there is a massive stack up in the 15th to 20th position on backs. 10 plus cars have crashed in turn 5.
That was a very big accident there. Turn 5, we just have the remnants of everybody getting back on track, but that was a huge accident. Just snowballed into effect, as we can just see it now. Look at the sheer amount of cars that were stuck, and we're just looking on board with the nucleus of it all as they were trying to get past each other, coming up towards the chute and just dive into the right, coming up towards carousel, and it's a very hard hairpin. Drivers braking, but braking not enough, and they catch the rear end of each other, and just a crescendo effect of everybody coming together at once. Lap 1, it is going to be a bit helter-skelter, shall we say.
There's a fast repair available for these competitors, but not the way 7 drivers wanted this to go. That's how many cars have already had to come down the pit lane due to incidents. One of those competitors did blow their engine before taking the green flag. That's the 700 of Roderbach. Now, these temperatures staying nice and consistent for these first few laps so far in the first couple minutes, but so far, Huffman's up 2 positions, Arabian's already up 3, making a move for 3rd spot.
And he just made it very nice and neatly already outside of the entry into carousel. He's definitely looking at the cars ahead of him of Gaspers and Huffman. Gaspers being the main target for him because the two of them have been inseparable in multiple races, trying to outdo each other and outsmart each other with overcuts and undercuts. With the long straight for this race in particular, and for the Summit Point in particular, I'm actually very interested to see if we'll see the same thing happen again as we have seen in the last few races. Undercuts were very powerful, so who will be the first to blink into the pits?
One of the first ones to blink for the race lead is Justin Huffman. He dives his way to the right side of the racetrack. There is some traffic ahead for some of those competitors who had to come down to the pit lane. Can Huffman clear on by, though, into the loop? Just about does. Gasper keep it side by side, though, as they make their way towards Wagon Bend for just the 3rd time in this race. And this is going to be the intriguing part, I think, as well, is with how the draft is going to play in. Yes, that front straightaway is going to be very critical. If you make mistakes, though, in the 2nd sector onward, you could potentially lose that draft, and it's already separated out almost 1.1 seconds between third and fourth.
And they did have a issue into turn one. Flavio Andolo, unfortunately, having a mistake. The whole field sort of had to check up as they were coming into turn one. But you are very correct for Farns Arabian, Ian Gibson not taking the best line through the wagon corner, and just had to lift off just ever so slightly to not get caught in the gravel trap and lose the control of the car. But at the frontier between these three, it's just so close, and you can see how much Hoffman is having to essentially place his car right behind, like a train almost, behind Gasper's. But here comes Farns Arabian.
Arabian trying to make up for an up and down round last time out, qualified 10th last time out at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, trying to find his way towards the front here at Summit Point early. Approaching 5 minutes in, side by side for second position. Huffman back off from the left side of the racetrack. No, tries to keep the fight, but Arabian able to clear on by at the bottom of the racetrack.
And a very well executed move by Arabian, keeping the car in the center of the track, just trying to inconvenience Hoffman, and he can secure the position as they come up to Wagon Bend, and he's still having to defend coming into Wagon Bend. It's going to be interesting when the tires start to wear away, and as drivers start to have to conserve tires, because the temperature is quite high for these tires, and so the tire wear is actually going to be quite more noticeable compared to, let's say, a Canadian tire, where the temperature wasn't really that bad, but we'll see.
I was watching a few track guides when it came to this facility, and it was mentioned in a couple cases that temperature could be the difference of 1 to 2 seconds in some cases for lap times around the racetrack, depending on what type of conditions you get. Keep in mind, Huffman practiced a lot, Robert, on this draft to be able to line up behind somebody like this. He's nearly getting towards the gearbox in the engine area of these cars in front. That's how close he's been getting coming out of turn 9.
And he's doing very well on the outside, coming onto the inside of Farns Arabian, and he's going to... Ooh, he's actually backing out.
We've seen how difficult it's been to make a pass, though, to the right side of the loop, though, Robert. As we take a look at the battles going on, and they collide. Ian Gibson among the cars involved. Thomas Render stuck with him.
And that was a crescendo of unfortunate events. We get a replay here. We can just see just a little tap. That's all it took. Oh, crikey.
Yeah, that was the 221 who went over top him in that incident.
And you can just see it here. This is actually very frightening how quickly this happens, because he's got nowhere to go. Up he goes.
Up he goes. On the bright side, he kept on going.
And at least the car isn't too damaged, but you could just see there was actually a piece of, I think, a GoPro camera or something that actually went off into the distance. And with these kinds of cars, with the exposed suspension, any damage is very critical damage. So it is going to be noted for these top three. Let's make the move. Let's keep the space between ourselves.
Speaking of trouble, though, the battle for 9th position just boiled over. You just seen to the backdrop, 2 cars making contact. The 314 getting stuck with the 922. Batley ended up getting contact after a bad run coming off through Paddock Bend, and then a car tried to make its move to the left side all the way through the sand trap. That didn't work out well.
Yeah, and the car got very upset with him. As you can see here, look how much speed they're carrying through it. He's just launching forward, but the car, as soon as he's going through the gravel trap on the left side, the car is actually trying to steer him towards the right, and he's trying to course correct, and it's just too late. There's already a car on his inside. He can't do it.
So attrition starting to come into play within the first 9 minutes or so of this race. Been intriguing to see so far. Tom Gradwell of note had some troubles as well. P6, meanwhile, continues to now form up a train. This is one of the closer trains so far. This is already 9 seconds back of the race lead. They're running in the 129s to 130s. Mike Taylor leads this group in the 966.
It's due to the temperature, as we said. it is going to start affecting these guys very quickly. You know, these tires are skinny. They're going to be at least 44 degrees Celsius. It's going to absolutely give these tires a quake in their boots, really, more than anything else, because these cars do slide around a lot. They're not like downforce cars where they can be planted on the track. They slide around a lot. They slide into corners, slide out of corners. So that sliding is going to ruin tires, as we can see. That's Jim Brewster on the outside, coming on the inside of Mike Taylor with the 933 coming on the inside. This is going to be, I think, where the race is going to be won for whoever makes it on the lead. So leaders, take note. Move on the inside, make it quick.
Keep in mind, a lot of these drivers in this group are fighting in the Masters class, so this is very valuable. And as well, this is for that lead for the class, so that's going to be very critical for both Brewster and Taylor to keep in mind, especially with Gradwell having his problems earlier on in the race. Gradwell was one of the top scoring drivers in the class coming into this round. A bit of a checkup now once more from Taylor, though. It got a little bit squirrely there, that time approaching the carousel.
Yeah, we are starting to see now overuse of the tires and sort of putting too much pressure on them. And, you know, even with the slow speed these cars go on, you know, they really start peaking at about 160, 161 kilometers an hour. They can still ruin these tires. So, Mike Taylor will probably want to, you know, calm it down, just keep it calm, make his overtake when he's ready rather than when he thinks he's ready. Let the car sort of sit gently. You just see, look how he's having to sort of minutely correct himself, and he's almost pushing Jim Brewster down the straight.
You know, exactly what we've seen from Huffman down through turn 9, approaching Paddock Bend. Taylor get the position back down the straightaway as they are starting to peak out at 96 miles an hour. See some puffs of smoke coming up as Taylor able to better rotate, though, from the right side of the racetrack. Brewster not giving up on the left side, though, in the midst of this fight.
Side by side, they go into, into Wagon Bend. You know, it's going to be very difficult. It is going to end in tears if they make it just a minute mistake, and Mike Taylor's having to back out, but he's having to back out when there's a car right behind him ready to make the strike.
Very intriguing battle, to say the very least, in this grouping so far. As they make their way around the track, Tom Gradwell, coming from the grass, says hello. It's been a rough day for Gradwell. He is 27th now, stays out of the way of this group. Yeah, and this is a big opportunity as a result for the drivers in the Masters to be able to gain a lot of points on him.
Yeah, Mike Taylor, top of the Masters in 6th overall, and he's having to defend against another Master of Jim Brewster. So they would kind of want to have the accolade of winning for the Masters today, but neither of them are going to give up without a fight, because they have been sort of tugging at each other for the last 10 minutes. 10 minutes gone. It is going to be 30 more minutes to go, and if they keep this up, they're going to leave the door open for other competitors as Jim Brewster just pips to the post. Mike Taylor coming down into turn 1, but Theo Taylor's there as well, so don't count him out. He could make it 3 wide coming into turn 1. No, he's just going to try and follow Jim Brewster through on Mike Taylor.
And don't forget, for Alexander Resson, he was one of those cars who were just involved moments ago in that incident in the loop, who went over top a couple of our competitors. So who needs a GoPro when you can continue to push on forward with his car? He's one of the quicker cars on the track and one of the quicker cars in time in this group.
He's doing, for somebody who has jumped over 2 cars, doing very well. I wouldn't be surprised if he will take a faster pair when he comes into the pits. Naturally, crikey.
And just like that, Mike Taylor gets hit from behind by him, and Taylor loses several positions, as well as the potential of the draft from that group all the way back to 10th overall. Here's a look.
And just on the inside there, just a little tap from the nose. The nose sticks out a long way. And these cars, once they're upset, they're very upset with you, and they just go off into the grass or they slide around.
2 drivers have had to come down to the pit road once more already. Jim McGill and Matt Schlom, who had some various troubles, I-55, with respective incidents. Meanwhile, The lead still staying Gaspers, Huffman, Arabian for the time being. Huffman, though, with a better run coming out of the loop. Once again, he seems committed to try and just carry the momentum forward, Robert, towards the back end. He seems like he wants to just stay behind and save for the time being.
And I think you are correct in this case. You know, Farnes, he made the mistake last week, and I think he has learned from last week that, you know, getting stuck in a 3 or 4 way battle and then getting caught in the middle unnecessarily loses you positions. So I think he's just going to sit back, gain fuel, or gain slipstream, gain fuel, make sure that he's maximizing the fuel saving as best he can over Huffman and Gaspers, where Gaspers is probably going to try and attack, or Huffman is going to try and attack Gaspers as much as he can. Let's see how he does it here.
Curious on that as well. Down the front straight away. Approach that start and finish line, and Huffman this time wants to take the peak. That time by the stripe, 18 estimated laps to go. Huffman, can he get fully clear? He's got a mile an hour quicker, and Gaspers lets him have the spot. A big backup of the corner that time, and Justin Huffman's 323 is to the lead.
And, you know, Huffman getting a very nice, leaving plenty of room. Gaspers definitely probably saw at some point fighting, because his real rival, SRF Arabian, is already there, ready to strike at the two of them when he can see fish. Though I wouldn't ride over the curbs as much, coming through the wagon bend as much as I would there, Farnes. He's coming in, he's just diving in, he's just holding directly behind Gaspers, just seeing how he plays against Huffman, and I think he will try and make a move, maybe where, you know, Gaspers least expects it, you know, maybe on the inside of wagon bend, just to try and upset him and maybe get enough of a gap to not get overtaken coming down to the start finish straight into turn 1.
Arabian's just been patient in this grouping. One of the drivers who was quickest in practice, put in a lot of time, has just spun around the 415 among the drivers around.
Yeah,
and
Theo Taylor and Flavio Ndolo as well. They're both around. The cameras strike again, and unfortunately he just did it all himself, going very wide, and there you see Theo Taylor and Flavio Ndolo making mistakes coming through the carousel, and it's all of their own doing, coming in too hot. Look how much speed he's carrying through, and he just tried to avoid it. Oh, turned around.
And sub racing driver can do there, spun off into the grass. And of note, a pit stop just took place as we were showing that for Arabian, a 10.7 second stop. So the pit stop window was open, and you mentioned the power of the undercut. That may be starting to come into play with Arabian just riding on behind before that entire time.
And Arabian does have a 2.5 second gap ahead of him, so he can actually put the hammer down, put in some very good laps. You can see just a string of cars, and then the gap that he needs. We're just looking at the ahead of the group that he'll be joining very shortly. Mike Taylor and Thomas Renders. Thomas Renders again involved in that serious incident into turn 1. He was actually the one of the 2 cars that was involved, sort of getting into tussles with each other, and he's gotten back up into 7. So he's doing very well for a car that really looked like it was going to be out. But he also has Alexander Garson behind him, battling for the same place of 6. So I don't think any of them would want to give up the ghost. Oh, crikey, that is going to be Thomas Renders on the inside coming up to paddock. Oh, he's going into pits.
Was going to say, that wouldn't have been the best of positions to try and make the moves based on how many times people have gone off through the hillside into the trees, and in some cases to Grandma's house. But these competitors continue to fight along with Huffman and Gaspers. 1-2 still, and the question's going to be, when do they come in?
When they think they can get enough of a gap ahead of SRF Arabian, they'll be looking at where he is and looking at that relative, because if it starts going against them, they'll pit. They'll have to pit and react immediately to how the gap is looking, and that's going to be Justin Huffman coming around.
And Justin Huffman, who had played things out very well from a top 5 starting position and had been in the lead group this entire time, snapped it around in turn 5. Unbelievable for Huffman.
He just had an upset car. You could just see it there coming into the turn itself. And it just it's such a sad moment. It just slowly came around. There's nothing he can do. It started and it didn't stop.
And not only that, he's lost his class lead with that spin. He's already coming into the pit lane. Simon Meyer, rather, has now moved his way into his respective grouping's lead. And already Huffman taking the service this time after that spin.
He's got nothing to lose at this point because he's already realistically, he is out of the running now. He'll have to take the service and recoup any losses that he can on the track. We had the cameras pointed, zooming by. There goes Forens, and he's probably, judging by my napkin math, it is going to be about 8 or 9 seconds that he's lost.
Going to be really intriguing to see how this plays out compared to Gasper's. That's the biggest question. Meyer, keep in mind, could take advantage of any battling. He's 2.8 seconds back of Gasper still on the racetrack. One of the things to note, too, on the pylon, we've followed along with Jim Brewer before. Remember, he was fighting with Taylor. He is one of your biggest movers at a plus 12. Tyler Montgomery, the biggest overall, is a plus 14. So some strong performances from some of the competitors making their way through attrition, but also flexing their speed muscles with some good pace.
And you can just see how they shape up now, and it is going to be interesting to see if they can continue doing it, because the time differences are actually starting to get quite extensive. I'm looking at our top 3 in preliminary terms, so that would be Gasper's Mayer and Foreign's Arabian. They're doing 127s. The rest of the field are doing 128. So it is a tale of 2 races. Who's got the pace for the top flight and who's got the pace for 4th? So I'm looking at the likes of a 126 from David Gasper. He's going even faster.
Keep in mind, he did pick up draft from lap traffic, so that's helping him too. As we take a look at the battle going on for 8th position, this is where Huffman's now shuffled about. That spin cost him 8 seconds to Arabian, and he wants some of those positions back here. Making his way around David Davidson, and as well as Miguel Uchendik. Clearing both of them by this time. Dowo was also coming in this time by for service, so a majority of the field has come in at least once already, with under 14 estimated laps to go and just past halfway on the mark.
And with the halfway, it comes a period of, I think, everybody sort of getting the same thought into their heads. Right, how do I get over there? How do I get into that next position? I'm looking at the likes of Mikhail Vichunik, Justin Hoffman. You know, he has to recover as best he can. He's actually already recovered a few positions on people that have not pitted yet, so it's very key that he has pushed as hard as he can. David Davison and the car 314 are going to be fighting with each other quite extensively. Alexander Garrison as well and Tyler Montgomery going to be fighting, so it is going to be interesting to see how those two fight. And then the crescendo event of Forens versus David Gaspers.
And keep in mind, too, it was talked about with Canadian Tire Motorsport Park that for Gaspers, he's already essentially used his 3 drops available. Did not race at Oldton Park, did not race at Brands Hatch, did not race at Motorsport. And that's going to be critical. How much pressure does that put on you as a driver, knowing you no longer have any races in the bank for anything that happens for your part?
It is going to put a lot of pressure, especially given the fact that he's already used his 3 lives, and he is basically on the one and you're out situation, where if he makes a mistake, he hands his position over to Forens Arabian in the championship. Now we'll have to wait for all the math to be calculated and all that kind of thing, but it is going to be very difficult to reconcile if he does make a race-ending mistake or he loses a load of points against Forens Arabian. It is a race to see from now on who can make the best amount of results in the shortest amount of time.
And for those who missed last week, Mosport was the lowest points scored for Arabian total on the season with 37. Second lowest was Olton Park's 52. As things continue to shuffle about, let's take a look at the battle going on for 16th. These competitors have all had to come in for service for various reasons. Some of them have had long pit stops, though, Robert, in the 23-second bracket in some cases. But they're all fighting pretty hard here in the back half of the grouping at the moment.
And with Flavio Dolo, by the way, he's actually making a good recovery. Jared is trying to sort of keep the group sort of in a line where they're all trying to get to Flavio. Flavio is the benchmark now ahead of them, but it is going to be very difficult because they're all leapfrogging each other at the wrong place. They should be leapfrogging each other coming into turn one where it's natural. The speed difference is not going to be good enough, and it is going to be very bad for one Jared Colo as he's got Theo Taylor on the outside.
Side by side heading towards the loop. The longest straightaway on this course. Look at this, though. The 222 actually gets a better pull and a quicker speed, heading to the corner to the point where he nearly missed his braking mark. Batley, who was involved in incidents before nearly getting contact with the left rear tire, able to keep it side by side as Jared Colwell.
And coming up into the wagon bend, does anybody flinch? Not necessarily. There's a little gap that opened up as the cars back out and sort of try and regroup. But it is going to be interesting for Jared Colo as he's now let Kenneth Batley off on his own. You can just see there's a massive gap of 7/10 of a second that's just opened up between the two. And does this give Kenneth Batley the legs he needs to sort of Kenneth Batley to sort of run away with it?
Keep in mind, Batley, one of the earliest of the drivers in his respective grouping who had a pit stop. Now up to 16th is -6 for him on the race overall. The gap has grown to 5 seconds to the next cars in front. Well, we are under 15 minutes to go, and it becomes the question, how long can Gaspers push it on the tank in many of these drivers? Right now, we are looking at about 7 or 8 drivers who are trying to extend it as far as they can, their fuel, to have a light car at the end.
Now, with a light car, it is going to be very difficult because we see Gaspers. He's, ooh, crikey. I was wondering if he had made it to the speed limit, but I think he did. Speed limit is 72 kilometers an hour, or just about 55 miles an hour.
45.
In the pits. Oh, 45, correction. In the pits. It's going to be interesting to see how Foreign's Arabian shapes up against him. Oh no, he's in the pits for too long, but Foreign's got pushed to the outside as he was trying to overtake Ian Gibson. Ooh, he doesn't have it. I don't think so. No, he doesn't.
This is going to be close, though. Better momentum for Arabian, and he's going for it. Gasper staying to the left side of the racetrack, keeping things defensive. A little bit of a squeak, and Arabian is now up to the race lead. The net race lead, with 3 drivers in front, still yet to pit.
And that was very, very close around the outside. Arabian really wanted, he really wanted that P1. He was trying every trick in the book to get that extra tenth, that extra sliver of time he needed. And now it is Gasper's race to lose and Arabian's race to win. Arabian just needs to keep him behind as much as possible. Then sort of, if he has to let him go, let him go. There's still plenty of time to, set something up, make the move on the second to last lap, going into the last lap, secure the position, going over the checkered flag.
Coming up to 9 estimated laps to go, approaching 12 minutes on the clock. Gasper's trying to go to the left side of the racetrack, this time towards Paddock Bend. These drivers taking a little bit different lines that time through 9 towards turn 10. But Gasper's trying to battle hard, goes to the right side of the racetrack. They do have lap traffic ahead. They also, keep in mind, have a lap car in their grouping in Jim McGill, who has already had to come into pit twice. Gaspers clears on by the stripe. Nicely done by David Gaspers.
He needs to be careful, though, does David, because he's letting Arabian dictate when he'll make the move, rather than it being the other way around. What should happen is that we all know how effective this move is. You're not going to be able to defend against somebody coming up against you across the start-finish straight when they have 2 to 3 kilometers an hour against you, because it is just going to be it's going to be very slow, and you're going to see it coming, but there's nothing you can do to defend against it. There's no way that you're going to be able to keep going around the outside unless you're exceptionally in tune with the car. But even then, it is going to be difficult because the car is sliding around a lot and the temperature is still very high. And so Gaspers has opened the wheelhouse to himself to be attacked from the rear by Foreign's Arabian.
Pit stop for Meyer, this time by in his 308 machine. So those drivers now coming in, going to stretch at 20 laps on the fuel. It's going to be tight, though, on where that 308 cycles out to where these cars in this group will be. Right now, 308 coming out of the pit box right now, just as these drivers are rolling by that pit exit, and they'll pass on by with ease. Gaspers, on with Arabian, on with McGill in their pack, having to break away by more than 15-20 car lengths, heading off to the loop with under 8 estimated laps to go.
And now Foreign's can play the MasterCard very effectively. He can just say to Gaspers, I'm here, you're best to be very good in that technical section, best be good around the carousel, or I'll come to bite you and get back that P1. And with Huffman now out of the equation, he's 6 seconds behind due to that mistake that he had coming through the carousel. So in front and full view of David Gaspers, Gaspers has all the pressure applied to him. Arabian can just sit back and wait until his moment is ready to strike, because he has a straightaway. He has a guaranteed move, essentially. And so all he needs to do is take it when he wants to.
Also going to be very critical, and keep in mind too with these cars, it was talked about a lot as well by some drivers across the service, where you need to line up the gear shifts near perfectly here, because it's a 1 to 2 second difference if you go even a couple miles per hour slower when you move up to the gear. So that's going to be very important too, to make sure you don't make that mistake and lose those valuable seconds.
It's slipstream. Unless you can get into slipstream and recover speed, you've lost it until you get to the next corner. So you can see here, look how close, and just how close Arabian is holding. He's holding here. He can make the move at any time he likes. He'll have enough slipstream to make it. He's just letting Gaspers know he's there. And if Gaspers makes the mistake coming into the technical section, he probably will lose 2 positions, because he'll have, well, 2 positions in, 1 for actual position and 1 because of the lapped car behind them. I think that is the car number 42. It is the car number 42 of Jim McGill, who will sit behind him, and he'll get out of the way, of course, once Gaspers catches it back up. But it's still an inconvenience for Gaspers.
It's an interesting equation to have the 21st place car, the first one 1 lap down, joining this grouping of cars. It looks like McGill, at the very least, is going to give them the space to potentially fight. He hasn't taken any runs quite yet to try and get the lap back. Keep in mind, pit stops have continued for some competitors. One has had technical issues, the 314, during their service. That is Ujinik, who ends up being off the track. But we're down to under 8 minutes to go, 5 estimated laps to go here from Summit Point.
And it actually looks like the car 42 might want to actually try and go for it, but he just holds behind. He is seeing that it is a battle for the lead, and it is going to be very tight for these last few laps. The clouds are sort of kicking in and sort of blocking out the track. It does, it does reduce it if the clouds stick there. So the changing temperature of the track will actually prove a little bit of a difficulty for these cars, because the tire temperature change will actually be quite noticeable, just due to the sheer nature of what the cars are. They're very mechanical.
It's gonna all be intriguing. By the way, Jim Brewster It's holding on to 6th position overall in the racetrack, holding on to his class lead by about 5 seconds over Mike Taylor. Thomas Renders keeping with this group. You also have 221 who is still able to hold on to a top 10 spot after his trouble earlier on in this race. These drivers are running 127.9s up to 127.2s at the moment in this group.
Coming through the carousel is just nice and easy. Just keeping it nice and orderly is Jim Brewster. He knows that, as with the Tom 2, it is the same situation here. Thomas Renders is in control of that position, technically speaking, because he can just make the move. He can make the move, coming up towards turn 1, and then seal the deal on that last lap. So Thomas Renders, the race is in his hands now for that 6th position. But in this case, there's going to be two other cars that are going to try and say no as they come around the outside. That is going to be Thomas Renders going against Jim Brewster coming into turn 1.
Keep in mind, very similar paint schemes on those two machines lined up on the right side. Them trying to work together to get the spot. Renders able to clear by 1. Harrison trying to follow on behind to get that spot as well, heading towards Wagon Bend. Will either of them back off? Brewster on the left side still has the buffer for the overall class lead, does back off for the time being. So move to 641 and 221 up to 6th and 7th respectively with a decent margin. That car behind is Tom Gradwell, who is a lap down.
And we do have the same situation between Jared Colo and Kenneth Batley, David Davidson. It's a who blinks first, or who can blink the latest, really, in this case. Who will make the move coming onto the final lap and hold it all the way through. Jared is leading the group of 3, almost becoming a group of 4 now at this stage. So there's 2 groups of 4 and 1 group of 2 in this conundrum of, do I make the move now and hope and pray that I can hold it for the remaining 4 minutes? Or do I wait until the final lap, the white flag starts waving, then make the move? I would imagine that Kenneth would probably want to hold position. He has enough of a gap behind him to sort of defend himself if need be, because David Davidson does have Gary of the car 23 to deal with for position. So does Kenneth Batley hold? No, he doesn't.
Batley's been continuously trying to gain back positions, it seems, throughout this race after his incident. Now Batley looking to dive his way in, gets a little bit of leeway from the car on the left side. Oblo lets him go with a bit of space. Now it's the question of how he pounces back for these closing stages. These drivers coming up to 2 estimated laps to go with under 4 minutes on the clock. And now this makes things interesting for the race lead. Gaspers hit a bit of the curbing that time. Going through Paddock Bend, does Arabian take the run is the big question. McGill's been lifting halfway down the straightaway to allow these two to fight. Arabian not able to build enough speed to close up the gap quite yet.
He's been lifting. I think he's been holding the throttle at 50 just to try and hold position behind. He definitely can overtake Gaspers, but he is holding until the very last moment to execute the move. And he's waiting until Gaspers now is ready and waiting for a move. Will Gaspers flinch under pressure and try and put his car in a way where it'll be sort of the biggest blocker against Forens, or just wait, let him overtake naturally, but then try and strike back going past Wagon? It does remain to be seen, but oh crikey, a car cut off.
I think that was Roggenbuck who was backing up out of the racing line to make sure he stayed out of the way for these guys. That's a bit of a scare to see going into the corner, to say the very least. But now it remains the question after seeing that and trying to set things up. How close do you get if you're Arabian to build up this run?
1 minute and 55 seconds remain. There will be another lap past this. So it is not the white flag just yet for these guys. There will be another lap. So Forens, I imagine, will stick behind. and wait until the final lap as they come around for lap 27. And I think we just had Thomas Renders. He's had a crash.
Yes, indeed. Thomas Renders' significant damage is now down the pit lane as these leaders continue to shuffle about. It's going to be interesting, the closing stages. The reason for that situation, by the way, slip and slide through the carousel and contact in that grouping that we were talking about for about 7th on back. But the focus stays up towards the front, expecting Barney the flagman to wave the white this time by, with these drivers making their way through Sector 2.
And when Barney does fly his flag, it is going to be Farns Arabian who is going to look up and see that happen, and it is going to be his move to make. He only needs to make the one move and then hold it for the rest of the lap. If he makes the mistake of getting carried away with the position, he could lose it through the carousel. So Gaspers isn't out of the woods. Neither driver is out of the woods yet. But we wait and see, does that pink car make the final move, and does Gaspers do anything to stop them? Does he take the inside line coming up to turn 1? Let's see.
The answer's about to come into play with 20 seconds on the clock. Down the front straightaway they go once more. White flag is waving from Barney the flagman. Final lap from Summit Point. The gap, 0.3 of a second down the front stretch. Arabian maxing out at 96 miles an hour, losing ground with a bit of a lift this time, heading to the loop. Bit of a slide going into the corner for this final lap to start.
It's so on. He actually lifted coming into the final turn. I'm so genuinely surprised. I would have imagined he would make the move here. But where will he make the move, Farns? Where will he make it? Will he make it coming into the technical sections? He's not got enough of a run on him. The gap is too big.
Can he find a way to close up heading into the technical section? They've got to turn to the carousel. About even footing in the braking marks this time along the rumble strips. The gap increasing by about 1/10 of a second in that section.
I mean, unless he wants to try and do a photo finish. I mean, it's so bizarre. Is he carrying damage? Is there something wrong with Farns' car? It baffles me, but he is closing it ever so slightly. Does he make the move coming into the final turn? Oh, he is very close.
This is it. Bit of a bobble for Gaspers. This is what Arabian was looking for. Down to the final straightaway. Cars in front. Checkered flag waves. He goes for the leap. At the line, it's Gaspers by 0.045 seconds.
He waited very, very late for that move. But a very good one. And we do have another battle brewing, and that is Jim Brewster. He's down.
And this is a big position with a big block heading towards Paddock Bend. A big salsa moment for Mike Taylor. He clips through the sand. Mike Taylor will take the final position, the top position for the Masters with a bold move and a big block.
Just ever so slightly out of kilter coming out onto the sand trap down the final turn. He did very well to keep it straight though. He did have enough of a gap behind him for Jim Brewster to not be threatening him coming across the line. But a very nice race by Mike Taylor. Unfortunate for Jim Brewster, but he did put in a good work today.
An intriguing race from Summit Point. Post-race coverage coming up in just a few moments. You're watching the Global SimRacing Channel from iRacing's virtual Summit Point, West Virginia. Welcome back to iRacing's virtual Summit Point, more coverage of the Weekend Warriors and its Formula V series, proudly sponsored by Ring Free. Choose Connection. Let's take a look at your unofficial race results as it came down to the final straightaway, but in the end, David Gaspers takes home the victory by an unofficial time of 0.046 seconds. Simon Meyer comes home in third, 4 seconds back. He lost more than a second in the pit window, while Justin Huffman was in the conversation for the race lead much of the competition, until a spin cost him about 8 seconds. He finishes 11 seconds back and forth, one of his strongest performances of the season. Behind them, Frederic Racedake in 5th, with Alexander Garissini in 6th. Mike Taylor was able to hold on in front of Jim Brewster in the late stages after having to close up a 3-second gap in the final 5 minutes to be able to take home the Masters victory. Ian Gibson in 9th, and Flavio Andallo rounds out your top 10, Robert.
And then Kenneth Batley, unfortunately, just not his race today. He's all the way back down in 11th. Jared Colo in 12th, holding off the likes of David Davidson and Gary of the car 23. And just keeping it nice and tidy. Unfortunately for Theo Taylor, not a great race for him. He actually lost 1 position, but I imagine he'd want to be up with his Mike Taylor brethren and punch his way to a 7th or an 8th. We get into 16th of Leroy Coppage, Mark Ehan in 17th. In 18th is Jim McGill. 19th, Thomas Renders, the biggest loser today after that accident through the carousel. A tire just literally went and popped off. Very, very strange. Just a little tap and then the tire pops off, and that costs him 13, correction, it's going to cost him 14 positions today. And then Christopher Frazetti in 20th, finally running off 21st to 27th. Ihan Ginn, Tyler Montgomery in 22nd, Tom Grudwell 23rd, Edgar Sancinelli in 24th. In 25th is Alexander Roggenbuck, 26th Mats Schobem, and in 27th is Mikhail in the car 314.
An interesting race today, but in the end, it's David Gaspers returning to the car and returning to victory lane. This is going to add to what has been a strong campaign when he's made starts. He scored 90, 90, 100, and 100 points respectively entering today's race in the previous starts. He adds to those starts today. David, first of all, a very dominant race for you today, up to the front the entire time around, starting from the pole after picking up some good, strong draft and qualifying. How are you feeling, first of all, about this performance?
To be honest, it was a bit boring. I think in the first part, they were just saving fuel behind me. At some point, Justin then overtook me, and I also decided to save fuel behind him to have a bit better pit stop compared to them. But then Forens directly pitted, so that wasn't really a possibility anymore.
Yeah, talk us through seeing Arabian behind and riding on behind, because, of course, there were 2 different strategies for you two today. You went far. Arabian went early on the pit window. How big do you felt that was, trying the different strategies with you going further on in your stint as long as you can go, while Arabian tried to go for the undercut power?
I don't think the undercut works in this car, since your car will be lighter if you stop later, and we don't take tires, so there's no advantage of it. I just couldn't pit earlier because I have to drive half a distance, so I know how much fuel to take.
Interesting indeed, and in turn, of course, strong points scored today, and this throws you into the championship conversation. Of course, next up, Watkins Glen. Your thoughts on going to the Glen for the Classic boot?
Awful track, and it's going to be annoying in the car with this little power.
Anyone you want to thank for your run today?
Yeah, I have to thank the guys in qualifying that gave me a draft. I don't know if I wanted to, but that helped. And yeah, you for broadcasting everything, and guys that organize it.
Thank you very much for the time, David. It's David Gaspers coming away with the victory today, starting from the pole, just getting the edge over Arabian. And Robert, your final thoughts on how things play out today, because it was an interesting battle amongst our top competitors with some different strategies. It was talked about a little bit by Gaspers. That difference in terms of pitting and stints is so critical in terms of how you fare with the lighter car. Your thoughts on how things played out
I think it was unfortunate for Farns Arabian today. I think he had the opportunity going across the white flag to make the overtake to take P1. I think he was fearing that if he had left himself open on the final turn, he could have lost P1, but not taking the risk earlier meant he lost the chance to win.
And as talked about the next track, Watkins Glen with the classic boot. David's not looking forward to it. Are you looking forward to it?
I am actually. It does lean into the fact that these cars have such little horsepower. I think that hill climb is going to be a very long one. But it is going to be interesting to see how the classic boot deals with these guys, especially given the fact that it's a nice sweeping right-hander going down. How do they take that? And, you know, we'll be able to see how they fare compared to something like the Skippies, for instance, or something like the Mazdas to see how the drivers deal with something that is going to be very technically difficult for them. Probably the most difficult technically of all the tracks they'll find in the Weekend Warriors.
Going to be interesting. But on that note, it's time to take the country home roads to take us home. As we'd like to thank you for tuning in for tonight's race from Summit Point. I'd like to also say thanks to Ring Free. You're going to find VoIP for your essential business. Find out more at ringfree.com. Choose connection. Also like to thank the company's provider software and hardware for our broadcast listed on screen, with additional thanks to Judith Lawn, who provides our wonderful music. See the screen for how to get a hold of more of her great work. I'd also like to say thanks to the team today in Rob, Sean, and Dougie. You can find out more info about GSRC at globalsimracingchannel.com or through our social media listed on screen. Also, please check out our merchandise store at simracingmerch.com/GSRC. Link in the description for a YouTube version of our broadcast below. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as ring the notification bell so you don't miss a moment here on the GSRC. As talked about, the next race goes to Watkins Glen International for the Classic Boot. That'll take place Saturday, August the 14th. Coverage starts at 3:45 p.m. Eastern Time. We also have upcoming races for other series listed on screen, so check those out and mark them down in your calendar. Up next on GSRC, it's BRL Grand National Series competition, Southern National. That takes place at approximately 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.